The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Talking politics with Phil Goff.
Yes, leader of the Labour Party, Phil Goff, joining us. Morning, Phil.
G'day, Wammo. You even knew it was me when I was ringing. Just came straight into the interview.
It's phone vibes. Feel the vibes. Talking about vibes, were you feeling the good vibrations from the Federated Farmers meeting that you had last week?
Well, I went into the Federated Farmers and just talked straight to them. They need more research and development. They've got to be innovative. That's how agriculture in New Zealand got to be at the top of the world, and they've got to keep innovating. They've got to keep using R&D. We're going to spend more money on that, but their contribution towards that is with agriculture coming in early on the emissions trading scheme, and we need that because we need to send a clear market message that they're pulling their weight and that there are incentives to get those agricultural emissions down. They're half of all of our emissions. Now, they didn't like the second part of my message, but they weren't surprised by it. We've been straight about that right from the start. And, you don't go into these meetings simply to try to curry favour.
Yeah.
It's about showing some political guts and saying this is what needs to happen and this is what we're going to do. And don't beat about the bush. They don't appreciate that if you do.
Well, they didn't appreciate the jibe either. National Party and gumboots is what you called Federated Farmers, which is probably, it's not untrue, but...
Well, of course it's not untrue. It's been, that's what they've been called for probably 2 generations. Somebody did correct me down there. They said, no, it's not National Party, it's probably ACT. So, who knows? Yeah. We'll work closely with all lobby groups, but in the end, we've got to govern for the interests of New Zealand as a whole. But agriculture is important to New Zealand. I never demean agriculture, nor the lobby group that supports it. But again, what would they be surprised about farmers traditionally voting National? Of course they do.
Let's look at free trade agreements. Of course, Labour and, in fact, yourself laid the groundwork for a free trade agreement with India. Of course, we've got the one now with China as well. But it's starting to, sit awkwardly with some MPs, possibly inside the Labour camp, like Claire Curran, who put a question out on Twitter. She said, "Wonder what will hand over more Labour outsourcing," and she was, of course, talking about the rail carriages that were going to be built down south and now going to be built in China, and that's because of these free trade agreements, is it not?
No. Actually, the decision could easily have been made to give it to Hillside Workshops to do the carriages, though not the electric locomotives. That's more complex work, and I think you would always have imported them. But the Labour caucus was incredibly disappointed at the lack of support given to New Zealand workers and New Zealand enterprise when Stephen Joyce sort of dismissed the work that was being done by Hillside. Hillside are incredibly skilled people. They're refurbishing carriages. For years they've constructed carriages, and we would have thought that the government would have gone out of its way to try to get some sort of joint venture deal, a little bit like we got with the Navy Project Protector, where 4 of the ships were built in New Zealand, the inshore patrol vessels. We've got the ability to do that, and 3 were built outside New Zealand.
But under a free trade China agreement, that could have happened over in China now.
No. Look, the free trade agreement didn't alter that one way or the other. The government simply failed. That we had a Burl report that said that the railway workshops in New Zealand were capable of doing the job and in a competitive way. They never got any support from the government, and that's what Claire was tweeting about.
But surely now, under these free trade agreements, the Chinese government could come around and say, "Hey, hang on, you've got these big infrastructure things going on at the moment. You haven't tendered out to us to have a look at this, and we'll probably give you a better price."
Well, you tender the process, but whenever you tender, within New Zealand or outside of New Zealand, cost is one of the aspects. That's important. The quality of the work and the benefit to the country are other aspects. And what you might have done is talk to various tenderers and said, look, we're going to look sympathetically at a tender that says that whatever work can be done in New Zealand will be done here. That would have been one way of exploring it. I'm not convinced the government ever did that. And within the rules set out internationally, for government procurement, you're looking at what the total benefit to the country might be. And, you can get it done maybe fractionally cheaper in China, but then you're not getting the tax off work done in New Zealand, you're not maintaining the skill base in New Zealand, you're not increasing the GDP by hundreds of millions of dollars that could have happened here.
Therefore, what's the point in having these free trade agreements then?
Oh, because free trade agreements are generally good for the country.
Are they?
Of course they are.
Are they bad for New Zealand workers?
No, look, people said that when we went in with Australia with CER back in 1984, and we were a huge beneficiary of that. They said that before we negotiated the free trade agreement with China, and it's massively increased trade with China because, the Chinese could always compete over our tariff barriers, which were pretty low anyway. We couldn't compete over theirs, and exactly the same is true of India. But when you negotiate the deals, Wammo, you're negotiating them around, making sure that you're promoting the best deal you can get for your country in terms of that negotiation. That's why, for example, Labor has said in regard to the Trans-Pacific Partnership, you're not going to trade away Pharmac. That's got nothing to do with free trade. That's got to do with sensible purchasing through a central agency, and we're not going to bow down to the interests of the big pharmaceutical companies in the United States. That's part of tough negotiating, and the Yanks will do the same thing back to us, and so will the Indians and the Chinese. You've got to be in there fighting for your corner, but you're also in there to get a deal that's going to be of overall benefit to the country, just as the other side is doing the same thing, because removing trade barriers generally is good for the living standards in both countries.
Okay, let's just quickly look at the government's plans today. They will unveil the infrastructure investment plan, which will outline which projects will be the top priorities for the next few years. Is this strange timing in an election year where, there could be a change in government and therefore the scenario and the landscape changes for the next few years?
Well, it could be, but infrastructure is an ongoing thing, and National, inherited a situation from Labor where we'd vastly increased investment in infrastructure, and they've continued most of it. They've given some different priorities in how they've done things. Probably Stephen Joyce's fascination with motorways has overcome his ability to look at other forms of transport.
Do you think the Holiday Highway will be in there?
Well, if it is, it's not something that's going to be continued as a priority by Labor. What we'd do, I drove up it the other weekend, actually. We'd spend probably a few $100 million on the necessary work that needs to be done, where there are safety and other considerations. But we're not going to have the whole gold-plated thing at $1.4 billion when there are other priorities.
Phil Goff, thanks very much for your time.
Okay, thanks, Wammo.
See ya.
Cheers.
Leader of the Labour Party, Phil Goff, there with us this morning.